You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get started with this week's episode, I have some amazing news that you guys must know about. And if you guys are Amazon shoppers, this is for you. We have a great new way you can shop on Amazon and help out the podcast along with the veteran community, and it doesn't cost you a thing. Simply go to our website, hazardground.com, and click on the Amazon banner on the homepage. You'll be taken directly to Amazon's website, and from there, shop away as you normally would. Best part about this, every month, we'll be donating a portion of the proceeds from Amazon sales through our website to one of the veterans organizations we've featured on the podcast. So not only will you be helping out Hazard Ground, you'll also be helping out such great organizations as Mission Memorial Day, the Greatest Generations Foundation, Merging Vets and Players, the Shadow Warrior Foundation, the Pat Tillman Foundation, and 22 Kill. So go to hazardground.com, click on that Amazon banner the next time you want to do Amazon shopping, do your personal shopping, your office business shopping, supply, whatever it is. It's a simple, easy way to give back to veterans everywhere and be part of the Hazard Ground community. So we are excited about this partnership with Amazon and hope you guys will use our website going forward to shop on Amazon. Reminder, follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Leave us a review on iTunes. Those are so huge for us because those reviews help spread the word of this podcast, and we are growing, folks, and we can't do it without your help. So share the podcast with a friend, let somebody know about it, and tell all your friends what the Hazard Ground is doing. Now on to this week's episode. This week's guest went from a Navy SEAL to an entrepreneur. He was a guy who spent time in the Navy SEALs and then got in at the ground level of a startup performance drink company called Killcliff, where he is the chief sales officer. He is John Timar on the Hazard Ground podcast. John, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here.
Okay, so, we don't see a lot of entrepreneurs on the Hazard Ground. There are a lot of people who do great things in their post-military careers, but people who start like drink companies and have businesses and things of that nature, that's something new for us. So I'm excited to hear about Killcliff and everything that you guys have going on. I'm a fan of the product, and certainly I'm a believer in what you guys are doing over at Killcliff. But we go back to the beginning, and you got your start in the Navy SEALs. When did you get into the Navy, and did you know you wanted to be a SEAL?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it was for me that being a SEAL was something that kind of stems from my childhood. When I grew up, my father he's a big movie buff, and we watched all the James Bond movies. And when I was in high school, I was terrible about everything that I had to do academically. But I didn't like reading that much. I didn't have the attention span for it. But I did find the Richard Marcinko books, and I read those. And back in those days, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have the internet telling us all these crazy things about these cool jobs in the military. But we did have a few books. We had 2 or 3 instead of 200. And there were a couple of them were the Richard Marcinko ones. So I read that, and I read I watched the James Bond shows with my dad, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. I'd like to do something like that. But it wasn't a straightforward path. I graduated high school and I went to college, and I was 3 semesters in when my parents, who I grew up very fortunate and lucky, they pulled the plug on my education. Until then, they were funding it, and I was kind of out on my own with nothing. And until then, I hadn't really pursued the path of becoming a SEAL, but I suddenly found myself with about $400 to my name and living in a strange state in a different city. I couldn't, really pay rent, and I stuck it out for a while. Though I didn't go straight into the military. I got a job making $6.50 an hour at Lowe's, and I bought a bicycle with my money, and I actually literally rode my bicycle 10 miles to work every day and 10 miles back. And I worked in the garden center, and I was moving heavy things around, and I did that for a while. I was playing guitar in a band, and that was really cool. And it dawned on me it was kind of a good process for me, because I kind of was on my own for the first time ever, and I had to think about what was I going to do with my life. And that's kind of when I made the decision, after about 6 months of being on my own, that as much as I love being in this band playing guitar, great rock and roll music, which I'd been in for a while, I'd been in while I was in college, that wasn't going to cut it. And I really couldn't justify going back to school at that time, because I didn't have any any money or any direction. So I said, well, I'm going to do this thing that I thought I would do when I was a kid. So that's kind of how it all started for me.
What year was this? Because this is all pre 9/11, correct?
Yes, all pre 9/11. It was 95, 94 going in 95. 94 is when I got the nice note from my folks saying, hey, look, we're pulling the plug. You're on your own. Do what you want. And so I was like, all right, well, I moved out of the house and I went back to where I was in college, which was at the time North Carolina State University in Raleigh. I grew up in the Atlanta area, so I moved up there. I hitched a ride up there with my sister and found some friends and got into a little cheap rent and started getting after it. So yeah, that was 95, pre 9/11. It's kind of interesting because as I was going through that process of thinking about joining the military. There were lots of different influences and things that I saw that kind of pushed me that direction. I remember one of them, like just watching some of the images from the stuff that occurred in Somalia playing on TV.
Yeah.
Right around the time I thought that I was joining, and I think maybe that happens to some people. For me, it definitely sort of cemented my thinking that I needed to prove myself. I needed to do something. I had this dream from being a child. And I felt very, I was very pro-American, so I was ready to try something.
It's interesting because, a lot of guys who, entered during that time, I entered in a pre 9/11 era. So, I mean, the reasons were various, but there wasn't this overwhelming sense of patriotism to do so because we were at a time of peace, like the economy was great and Bill Clinton was president and we had so many other things to focus on. And, so the military, even at that time, was starting to downsize, right? Like they were actually looking to get rid of people because we had this robust active force that we didn't really have a need.
You're right. It was actually a very tough time in the military, and maybe we can touch on that a little bit later on too, because that impacted how I grew myself throughout the teams and after the teams. But yeah, for me, joining the SEAL teams, I mean, I did see the Charlie Sheen movie and thought I could be a little bit like him, but joining the Navy and then going into the SEAL teams was more. It was honestly more of a personal agenda and goal to challenge myself in ways that I've never challenged myself and prove to myself after kind of dropping out of college. And I felt kind of bad about that. I felt like I let my family down. I felt bad because it seemed like all my friends had direction and I didn't have any direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it was just as much a personal thing as it was my grandfather was in World War II. I think he was a cook, so I don't think he saw any action. And I hear he was actually very good at getting fresh eggs to the troops, which people love. Yeah, and my father was A6 intruder, bombardier navigator. So he was actually I think he finally resigned after about 12 years in. He was lieutenant commander, and our family had moved to Atlanta, but he was on the Nimitz other carriers, and I always had this patriotic calling. I think some people just feel that way. You grow up and you play G.I. Joe and you want to be, you want to serve. And I wanted to serve, but there was an absence, and it was clear when you were in the military at that time, once you got in, because your motivations could be very legit. Like when I got in, I was like, all right, like, I hope there's a war because I want to be this
I'm going to go save America all by myself.
Exactly. That's how I felt. Like, so I had that sense of mission, but there was an absence of an overarching mission at that era.
Right.
And, it was clear, it played out in everything. It played out in politics, played out in the military. And it's exactly what you said. And I experienced that, we all experienced that, which was the downsizing and bases closing. And, it was also very financially challenging for a lot of troops.
Now, when you signed up for the Navy, sometimes there's guys have a lag in getting in to go try out for SEALs. Did you get in, go to Navy boot camp, and then get right to SEALs, or was there a lag time in between?
Oh yeah. So I was pursuing my rock and roll career at the time, so parallel path. But I did start talking. I think about 2 or 3 months out before I actually went to boot camp. I did flirt with the Army a little bit just to see. I knew I wanted to try something in special operations. But my heart was in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy, and I really thought the teams were incredible. And everything said it was the hardest military training in the world. I feel that way still, but I'm biased because I went through it. So yeah, I about 2 or 3 months out before I pulled the trigger. I was flirting around. I looked at the Army, but my heart was really set on the SEAL teams. I heard it was the hardest training in the world. That's what everyone said. I feel that way still. I'm sure people argue with me, but it's really, really hard. And so I started looking into it, and I decided, yeah, I'm going to go do this SEAL thing. That's what I was focused on. I was interested in it. So I think I signed up and actually signed my paperwork about 2 months out from actually shipping away, like going to the MEPS and then going to boot camp. I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. We call it Great Mistakes. But yeah, it's common Navy terminology. So what was really interesting though in that process is, everyone tells you when you say you want to be a SEAL, they're like, all right, like the recruiter is like, yeah, all right, so you're not going to become one, but you can try to go. And what you need to do is you need to get a source rating school. You need to get a trade school set up, because when you fail, you got to have a job, because, if not, you're going to be like literally chipping paint on the side of a boat. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. But I'm going to make it. He's like, yeah, sure, everyone's going to make it, but just trust me, get a job. I'm like, well, what job should I get? What should I do? And he's like, all right, well, do this radio man thing, because then when you get out, you can go make like, $40,000 or $50,000 a year. And I'm like, all right, that sounds good. I'll do that. So I signed up, and they had programs at the time called like Dive Fair and stuff like that, but I didn't sign up for that. And the Dive Fair program, the only difference is they gave you a guaranteed shot to go to SEAL training, but you had to pass all the tests. But it was a 6-year commitment. And at the time, everyone's telling me that you're going to fail. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't think I'm going to fail, but who knows what's going to happen. So I'm going to sign for the 4-year plan. So I didn't do Dive Fair. And so I signed up, and it was really interesting though, because when I got to boot camp, I literally had like maybe two chances to screen the entire 8 weeks of boot camp. And it's really important, and this is how it was during that era. It was really important at the time to pass the test,
right?
Because in order to pass, you had to pass the test in order to get your orders blocked. So basically, what would happen is if you passed the test, then you would go straight to your A school, because that was already written into your contract, and then you go straight to BUD/S. If you didn't pass the test, then you had to go to fleet for 2 years before you had a chance to screen again.
Whoa!
So it was like there was a lot of pressure, and a lot of you had to do it. And it was kind of funny, because I grew up I'm a big guy, and I grew up I played linebacker in high school. I never run a mile in my life. That was like brutal, just running a mile. Doing pull-ups, forget about it. I could bench press anything, but doing pull-ups, it's just not the way my muscle composition is distributed. I'm just not. I wasn't good at it then, and I'm still not good at it.
You were gravitationally challenged.
Yes, I am. So it was kind of funny, because I remember at night in boot camp, and we would go, like, all the guys that wanted to be SEALs, we would go to the bathroom stalls, and where they had the little metal bars, just above the door, and they're real skinny, and we do pull-ups there. And the most I got to was 7. And back in that era, and I think they may have changed a few of the standards, but the test was, you had to do, first, I think it was a 500-yard swim, and you had to do side stroke or breaststroke. And then you get out of the pool, and you kind of meander until everyone was done. And then you get in a big line, and you dead hang pull-ups. None of this like CrossFit camping type stuff and,
right.
These muscle ups. This was like real deal, like up on my count and down on my count. And the instructor had their hand right in front of you, or a broomstick in front of you, so you couldn't swing at all. And I remember I was a good swimmer growing up. I was on swim teams, so I wasn't worried about the swimming part. And in fact, I crushed everybody. I probably should have been a little bit more strategic, but I was like the third guy out of the pool. And that day that I screened, there was probably about 100 to 150 people screening. And by the time we got through the screening test, there was like 15 of us left. But I got through the swim, and then we basically get from the swim and get in the line for pull-ups. And I just kind of meandered. I was real strategic. I was like, oh man, like pull-ups are coming up. I got to rest.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can get more rest if guys get in front of you, right?
Yeah. So I was actually being kind of cagey, and I think the instructors didn't like that. The dive motivator, as we call them. And so what happened is that when they finally got everybody out of the pool and they formed a line, I managed to get towards the end of the line. And so I had time to rest. I was resting my arms the whole time. I got up there, and it was the very first time I did 8 pulls in my life. I was feeling strong. I had a lot of adrenaline going, and I got to like my the 7 count, and I hit it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got at least two more in me. And then he called me up for the 8, and I barely got up, and I held it, and he said down. I knew I was in there. He called me for 9. I was like, yeah, whatever. I got like halfway up, and I dropped. He's like, get off the bar, son. And I said, and I was so excited because at that point, I knew I had a shot. So I went and the push or the standard like PT test types of like push-ups and sit-ups. That was simple. That was just like 50 in 2 minutes or something like that for each of them, and then it was the run. The run was the next hurdle for me, but it was basically set out to where it is an 8-minute pace, which I knew was doable, but I had to work hard even though I wasn't a runner. But we had to run with steel-toe boots on and dungarees, so basically like blue jeans for people who don't know what those are. And it was tough. I mean, I finished with like 15 seconds left, but then I knew at that point I was like, I got my orders blocked. I'm going to get a shot. So that's kind of how it happened for me. But I knew going into SEAL training, there were some things I was really bad at, like pull-ups and running. So I was lucky to have a couple of months at A school to really work on that. There wasn't like now. I think there's a huge pipeline of programs in place to get people ready for SEAL training. It's like they get people hyper ready for it. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes I think I was like, would I have even been considered as a candidate? I mean, I was a good SEAL by all accounts. I mean, I worked my butt off. I did great things. I had great opportunities, and I got great friends to this day. And the SEAL teams have made me so much of what I am today. But like, would I even had a shot in this current era to go through training? Like, I wonder that sometimes because the things that I was bad at are things they want you to be good at, and I became good at them on the fly.
Right. All right. So you get to BUDS again for those civilians. BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition School. That's your entrance into the Navy SEALs. Attrition rate is just insanely high. We've talked a lot with other SEALs about the bell. The bell there. If you want to drop on request, you ring the bell and you call it quits. So you got there. What were your impressions walking in? What were you thinking heading in? Did you have any preconceived notions?
Yeah, it was like Thunderdome, man. I didn't have any preconceived notions. I was training really hard before I got there. So I had a good group of guys in A school. There's a bunch of guys that are going to be SEALs. Everyone's going to be a SEAL. Everyone's going to make it, right? So I had a bunch of guys. You'll hear this if you talk to different guys from the teams. They're always finding people beforehand they bond with, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do it together. So I had that group, and we had this cool little training program where we would run to the beach every day. We were in A school in San Diego, run to the beach like 3 miles, and then we go for like a 500-yard swim, and then we run back 3 miles. So I got really good at some of that stuff. But when I checked in the BUDS, it was complete insanity. I was in pre-training, and it was right around the holidays in 95, 96. In fact, I didn't even go home on leave. My parents were trying to buy a ticket for me to come home for like Christmas, and I was so locked in mindset-wise. I was like, I'm not going to go home, and I'm not going to go get out of shape. I got a good plan here. This is everything's riding on this because this is what I want to do. And so, but yeah, checking in was really interesting though, because when I showed up at BUDS, the first thing you do when you show up at Dane Military Command, I'm assuming some of this is still the same, is you go from like component to component across the base, and there's all administrative stuff you have to do, right? So we hand out our paperwork, to the finance people, or we go to the medical clinic and we get a bunch of shots and immunizations. And so there's a bunch of different places you need to go basically to end process. So the day I showed up and started in processing, they randomly, there's like maybe there's 8 or 10 people that showed up that day. And 4 of us just kind of were congregating together. It was me and John and Chris and John. So 3 Johns and a Chris. And we just went around the base, like, doing our thing. And it's kind of funny because a couple things happened. We went to medical and we had to get like our blood drawn and all that stuff. And this, I remember this gal was really like digging in. My veins they're kind of embedded. You really can't see them well. And she was trying to get like some blood from me, and digging around, I passed out. Next thing you know, I'm on like one of those decline benches with my head down low with the blood flowing to me.
Oh my God!
And right when I come through, there's a retiring frogman master chief. He's got a big chaw in his mouth because that's what we did back in those days. And he's got a big old nasty mustache, and he's like an inch from my face, stinky breath. And he said something to the effect of, "Son, you're never going to be a frogman." And he's kind of laughing, and he's like spitting all over me as he's talking. I'm like, oh God. So that happened. And then And then we're going through the chow hall line later on, and we're in our dress whites because that's what you check in, right? You're in your best uniform. And we're going through the chow line. I guess the cocktail medications they put inside me, something went wrong, and I passed out in the chow hall line. So twice my first day there, I passed out.
Not a good sign, John.
Yeah, it was terrible. And the worst thing about it is it was like lasagna and spaghetti. So that was all over me too.
Oh God.
So I'm like, this is starting off real good for me, guys. This is going to be great. So what's really interesting is those four guys that we checked in together, and we were all like, me and this one John, we're chatting it up, and we're kind of sizing everyone's sizing each other up. It's kind of like if you showed up to like football camp or wrestling camp or some athletic camp for the first day with a bunch of people you don't know, you're sizing each other up. And everyone there is, by all means, I mean, they passed a screening test. There were a lot of people in my class in particular that had some level of collegiate athletics that had either dropped out or maybe they finished and were looking for something new to do. So I'm talking, I like to talk, and I'm talking trash. And so I told John, I'm like, hey, John, that guy up there was a guy who's clearly there in age waivers, and he was like 30 years old, and he was one of the other Johns. And he was like real small and skinny, and he had this big old fat greasy face. I call him the Grease Man, and he still has that nickname to this day. So the Grease Man, I was telling my friend John, I was like, that guy is so skinny and small. There's no way he's going to make it through. And it's kind of funny. Fast forward 6 months. The four of us that checked in were 4 of the 8 originals that graduated with that class. So we only had 8 people out of 130 that graduated straight through. There were probably another, 8 to 10 that rolled out and graduated elsewhere. But for us, our direct attrition rate for going straight through is about 94%.
Wow.
So that's for me checking in. It kind of was it was like Thunderdome, and I passed out twice, and I sized up the guy who wasn't going to make it, and he made it with me. It was kind of interesting, first day on the job. What
was the hardest part about Buds for you?
Oh man, I mean, Buds, it's so hard to answer that question because there's a part of you, I think the people who make it through at some level, they find enjoyment in it, right?
They love the pain.
I found it to be, maybe that's it. I don't know. To some people, to me, it was a big adventure. I was terrible at a lot of things though when I started. I was just the minimum qualification standard. So I think early on for me, like where I had challenges, I didn't really have challenges in the water. There were some evolutions that were really tough. Like I didn't really fail anything going through Buds, which is credible for how I describe myself. But I did. There were 2 things that I really had a hard time with. You could read about these things and see them in documentaries, so it's not like I'm giving away any crown jewels or secrets here. One of them was underwater knot tying. The first time I did it, I just didn't have. It's like a strategy, and there's a certain way you do it. And this was in pre-training, so unfortunately I didn't fail when we did it for real on first phase. But we were up in this thing. We used to have this huge dive tower, and it was just going in there was really, really cool. And I remember the first time I was down there trying to tie knots, and I just bolted to the surface. I lost my breath, and it was terrible. And the instructors were yelling at me, and it was crazy. So that was hard for me. And then later on, there's this evolution and dive phase where you're treading water with some real heavy tanks on you. And that's all technique, and I didn't understand at the time. Once I learned the technique, I passed it the second time. But I think going through Buds for me, the hard thing was really the running part. And it wasn't really that's just on a physical level. It was, for me, I had to get better, and I had to get better. And at the beginning of training, I was terrible at it relative to my peers. So I was in something called the Goon Squad. And the Goon Squad, another thing you can read about, is they're the guys that are bad at running. You're like in the back of the pack. And so they pull up next to you in like an ambulance, like a big van. It looks like an A-team van,
Right.
And they're on their megaphones going and telling you all sorts of great things like, get back in the trunk. You need to quit now. And so it's kind of like that sort of cadence of just like trying to talk you down. And what they do is they start to wrangle all the people that are slow, and they give you extra benefits. You do all sorts of extra calisthenics. You do all sorts of extra wind sprints. You're running with guys on your shoulders, and they're just beating you down. So I just stuck it through. I remember I had this one senior chief who was trained. He was so frustrated by my slowness early on that he would pull me aside and just yell in my face. He's like, "Why don't you just quit right now? You just suck. You're terrible." I'm like, I'm not going to quit. I wouldn't tell him that because that would just give me extra benefits. But yeah, so I mean, that was really the hardest thing for me physically true training. But at the end of the day, like, people make it because they're mentally tough, right?
Well, that's
And
what I was going to
at the end of
ask
the day,
you. I mean, you seem to indicate that you struggled with a lot of the basic tactical stuff that they wanted you to do, and yet that didn't get you kicked out, and clearly you didn't drop. So from that standpoint, I was going to ask you about what was the redeeming quality that led the SEALs to keep you?
Well, I didn't fail anything. I mean, I just wasn't as. I mean, they wanted me. They were on me because they wanted me to be faster. They wanted me to be better, right? They wanted to build me. They break me down and build me up, and they do that to everybody. So there wasn't. I never was at a point where it's like, this guy. If you were failing evolutions, and they will drop you. If they think that you have a lot of good like raw material they can mold, they may elect based upon your performance, your personality, and what you could bring to the Navy. They may to the teams. They may like roll you and give you a second chance. That wasn't my case. I was just I'm just telling you the things I wasn't great at, but I was good enough to pass the minimum standards.
Right.
But I just got better and better and better. But at the end of the day, SEAL training is about mental toughness, and that's what I just remember for me, and everyone has a different experience in this capacity. But like for me, watching people quit, because there are people I came in and I sized up, and I'm like, wow, that guy played linebacker in college. I'm so glad he's on my log PT team because he's strong as an ox, and that's a true story. But this guy is like an amazing triathlete, and you see him and they outperform you in certain things that you're struggling at. And to me, it was like when they quit, I was like, wow, like I'm really getting stronger every day. I'm really exploring myself here. I'm testing my personal challenge, my personal limits of what I thought I could do, and I'm surpassing them. And I'm getting faster. I'm getting stronger. And I was emboldened. I mean, I felt bad. I had a lot of friends that quit, and I didn't really want them to quit. But when they did, every time they quit, it just made me stronger. It just reaffirmed to me that I had a purpose here and that I could do this. I remember one time this guy named Wyatt. He was just an incredible athlete, and he smoked everybody on the swims and the runs. And we were doing this thing called rock portage. And rock portage is kind of from the outside looking in, it might not look that bad, but it's terrible. I mean, and I don't mean that in like it's a dangerous exercise, right? So you're basically taking these rubber boats we call IBSs, and you're rolling them in to these rocks. And your challenge as a boat crew, it's a great exercise in teamwork and leadership. Your challenge as a boat crew is to get out of the boat and lift the boat out of the water and get the boat over the rocks to the other side of the rocks on the beach. And it's like kind of like a jetty. It's really, you do it at night. And I mean, it's kind of interesting because the waves get pretty big out there, and they're lifting the boat up and just smashing the boat into the rocks as you're trying to operate as a unit, getting out of the boat, up, lifting up the boat, getting the boat over the rocks. And we have all, calls and cadence that we use to try to do it in a coordinated fashion. And I remember when we were about to start doing it was a pretty nasty night. When I went through buds, it was El Nino season, so the weather was all off the whole time I went through buds, and there was all sorts of crazy weather and big waves and all sorts of stuff. And so this guy Wyatt, who, I mean, he's one of the guys who sized up and say, this guy's going to be the man. He's going to make it through. He's going to be like Super SEAL. Didn't happen. I watched that guy make a beeline right before the evolution started. He was so scared. He broke mentally. And you saw this. I mean, you see it over and over again. There's this one time where they do simple things to you. Like they put us in the San Diego Bay. This is probably like the third or fourth week of training, middle of the day. And we're out there. The water's probably about 60 degrees, maybe 58, 60 degrees. It's pretty cold. And they have a whole line of people. We probably still have like 70 or 80 people left in our class. Interlock arms. And we went, we were probably about like, maybe we were on our knees, interlocking arms. So we were probably, generally speaking, average person about mid-waist to chest level depth.
Right.
And when the instructors hit the bullhorn, the only thing we had to do was put our head underwater for like a 3 or 4 second count and then bring our head up. And we did it for like an hour. And it got to the point where people started quitting because they didn't want to put their head back in the water.
Wow.
It was just brutal. And you can't imagine that till you're in it. But when you're in it, there's people that like, they won't put their head back in. It happened again. It actually happened after SEAL training in my class. We were doing this thing called hydro reconnaissance, and we were doing it in the night. And I mean, I said SEAL training. I meant Hell Week. After Hell Week, for my class, we were doing this thing called hydro reconnaissance, and we were out in the water, and it was a nasty night. It was super cold, and the waves were crashing, we're freezing. The instructors were out trying to do this reconnaissance in the water, and they keep calling us in, and they're beating us down. And we're wearing like a half wetsuit, and they think, "Hell, take it off and get back in the water and do it again." So we're wearing our little UDT shorts and a t-shirt, and they bring us back in. They're yelling at us, making us do calisthenics. So basically, a standard thing in SEAL training is we get you down to your body temperature really near hypothermia, and then we build you back up, right, through exercises. Then we put you back down. So it's a constant thing. And while you're doing that constant thing, it's breaking you mentally. I remember it was this time where, we were brought back in there, and they told us to take off all of our clothes. And when they told us to do that and get back in naked, just that idea that there was just a little bit of clothes on you to keep you warm, even though it wouldn't really. And the idea that you're going to have to keep doing this, even with no clothes on, in the cold water, middle of the night, people quit. They quit right there. And a few of us, there weren't that many of us left in class that time. We ran and jumped in the water and were yelling out "Hoo-yah," getting excited about it, like trying to overcome the adversity. And we just saw like 3 or 4 people just quit right there. They wouldn't get back in the water. And within like a minute of being in the water, they canceled the evolution for the night. So those guys, if they just done it for another 60 seconds, they would have been good.
That's unreal. So, I mean, the fear of the unknown sometimes really just overcomes a lot of people. And it's what separates, guys who do the SEALs and people who don't. That doesn't make them bad soldiers or bad sailors or whatever. It's just, there's a reason why the attrition rate is that high. It's only meant for certain people.
Yeah. And, and that's the thing. There's a saying in the SEAL teams. It's true. It's the only easy day.
It was yesterday. Yeah.
Right. And so like you can't imagine it till you're in it. But when you go to a SEAL team, the things you do and the things they're asked you will be harder and will be in worse conditions. You'll be colder. You'll be wetter. You'll be more tired than anything you did in BUD/S. And that's just the truth. That's what it is. It's a hardcore environment. And when you get there, everything you did in training, there's a reason you did it, because people are going to depend upon you in really challenging situations. And it's a high risk job. You're putting yourself in a lot of like physical exposure in a lot of things you do, and you have to have attention to detail. You have to have mental toughness, because those two things are going to keep you safe and are going to keep you operational as part of the unit as you go into these really much harder things that you do when you're SEAL.
So was passing BUD/S the proudest day of your life?
Yeah, probably one of them. I mean, it was up there with having a kid.
Right.
It's just like, it was one of these things, like everybody told me I couldn't do it. My friends from back home, the recruiter, even the instructors in phase 1. And then, and even my when I called my parents after I got through Hell Week, they were shocked. They didn't even think I could do it. So it was one of those things, for me, it was a super empowering experience in so many ways. And it was an amazing, it's one of those things for me was just like the biggest adventure of my life. And I have nothing bad to say about it. It was a test every single day. I got better at things every single day. And at the end of the experience, I was there with 8 other guys or 7 other guys that started with me 6 months before, basically graduating and getting our orders to the next place.
That's inspiring stuff, man. So, we talked about you doing this during peacetime. So a brief overview, and if you want to talk about a specific, mission or anything that you went on, but, in your time there, obviously the operational tempo wasn't very high because we weren't at war. There's still bad guys around the world, but, kind of give me the overview of what you did once you got to the teams.
Yeah, sure. So I went to SEAL Team 8. I had orders there out of BUD/S, and back in that day, a lot of this training is internal now, but back in that day, we'd go to different schools and stuff outside of the Navy as part of our pipeline. And I went, I finished BUD/S and I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for a few weeks to get my jump wings at the Basic Airborne School. And then I checked into the SEAL Team 8. How
easy was airborne school compared to BUD/S?
It was really, look, great respect for people that are airborne paratroopers, but coming from BUD/S, it was a cakewalk.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured.
Yeah, we got in a lot of trouble there. They did not like us. It's probably a good thing that they they moved it into an in-house Navy school because we came in, we were super arrogant. We were not cool to the instructors. We didn't do anything the Army asked us to do, and we were just like discipline problems for them. So
yeah, that airborne shuffle didn't push you like they did in Buds.
No, but I do remember, like, you know, they used to do that. They probably still do that run down the hill to the hangar.
Yeah.
And the purpose of that run, when you're doing the 5 jumps, is to make sure that you're not, like, you don't have an injury you're trying to conceal. And if you do, then you got to do like the school again, or at least stick around and do the 5 jump. My first jump, man, I twisted my ankle so bad when I landed. It was black and blue. And I pumped so much Advil. It took so much willpower running down that hill. I was not going to have a limp at all because I was not going to stay there. So I did have a little snafu. But anyway, so I went from Fort Benning and I checked in at SEAL Team 8. It's kind of funny because I checked in at SEAL Team 8, and you know, my first day I'm wetter and colder than any time I was in Buds. My first day as a new meet checking in, I had to give support a platoon that was about to go out the door and exercise in the middle of the Chesapeake in the middle of the wintertime.
Wow.
And it was freezing, and they were doing some stuff like outside of helicopters out in the open water, and I was in the support unit, and you know, in a rib out there, and it was pretty gnarly that night. But it's kind of funny because one of the things that happened when I checked in, we were all waiting to go to advanced training, and so you get, you know, sequestered off to different jobs. And I happened to be there the day that we got the call. The call was, do you have anybody at SEAL Team 8 that can box? Because the British Royal Army has a boxing team, and they're traveling the world and doing smokers events for morale and recreation, and they want to do one at the Little Creek base. And of course, I had this old salty Master Chief who's like, yeah, I got a bunch of new guys right now that are perfect to be boxers. So that's how I started out my SEAL Team 8, with a punch in the face. It was awesome.
Wow.
Literally. So here's a story. So literally, this guy, like the British Royal Army, is looking to line up fights, and they call the base commander for the base that we're at, and he's like, hey, you know, do you guys have anyone that can box? We want to do a smokers event. And base commander's like, yeah, I got SEALs on my base, I got Marines on my base, I got CBs on my base, I got EOD on my base. Absolutely, we're going to do an event here. So then the base commander calls up this is the story at least, he calls up all the different commands, and the commands are like, heck no, I'm not putting my guys out there in front of like basically professional boxers that are on a British team cruising the world and beating people up. And when they called SEAL Team 8, the command master chief is like, I used to train boxers. Yeah, we're going to do this thing. I just got 8 new guys. Let's do this thing. And so I spent my first 2 months at SEAL Team 8, like 2.5 months, like boxing every morning, which is kind of interesting because I was in, by all means, like peak condition of my life, and doing the boxing workout for 2.5 hours every morning.
Oh yeah,
that was a burner. I mean, that was a gut check.
Yeah.
So we went in a couple of months later and fought the British Army, and it was a bloodbath. I was one of 2 people to win.
Wow. I mean,
I got the trophy to this day.
I'd be proud of that. That's survival of the fittest right there. That's Darwinism at its finest.
Yeah. But it's a long story, but that's what happened. So yeah, SEAL Team 8 was really cool. I checked in there, and I got I immediately went through advanced training and got in a platoon that was operational, and there wasn't much going on that era. I mean, we were really focused on things like like stabilization in the Balkans. There's a whole Kosovo thing that kind of came on towards the end of my time in the Navy. There was stuff going on still in the Middle East. There's a lot of counter-proliferation missions. At that, there was some counter-narco stuff, but at that time, the likelihood of seeing action as a SEAL was slim. I mean, it was basically almost like had dumb luck. You had to be in the right place at the right time.
Sure,
it wasn't like we're in this combat environment. And there were people who did. I mean, there were things that happened, like there was Haiti and Panama, and there were guys who saw some action in those events. And there were some things that happened. The guys over at Dev Group clearly were doing much cooler stuff than us at the time. But there wasn't really like that much. I remember being overseas, and that's when the embassy bombings happened and all that stuff. And we got called away to do some like stabilization in Albania, and that was kind of cool. But it wasn't like, it wasn't like anything.
Yeah, well, it's not like anything that we know now.
It just wasn't like that. We just like kind of showed up, and they were worried that there were some potential threats in the environment, and we just did patrols, and I mean, like we spent a little bit of time. We got to do a little round robin of work. Like back in that day, basically when you went overseas as a SEAL, you would do a lot of training with other military forces, and you suntan, you'd work out, you go skydiving as much as possible. We love skydiving, so you go do a lot of skydiving, and you do a lot of exercises. The one thing that was kind of cool, and this might be cheesy to guys that are like combat vets that do all sorts of cool stuff, but it was cool for me. When the whole embassy bombings happened, and that we were over doing some training in the Gibraltar area, like it was kind of like the movie, because they need us to deploy and they need us to go somewhere to provide security, and like we had to coordinate all our assets because we were working on exercise. We were all out having a good time at the bars, partying all over Gibraltar, and it's kind of like these MPs, these British MPs, like cruised all over the rock there, and they were picking us up, and it was like, wow, something cool is going on. This is like the real deal. It's what we've been training for, It's like the moment in Top Gun. So it's like. So they go around the mountain, they're picking us up, and then they bring us back, and we get all of our stuff together throughout the morning and the next day, and then that night we had to fly out of there, and it was kind of interesting because they had this little airstrip there in Gibraltar. There was no one there. There were no lights on. The C-130 sets down in the middle of the night. We all pop in the back of it and fly off. Next thing you know, we're in Albania. So that was pretty cool. I mean, it's just like a cool scene. But for me, it was like when I was in. You train for these elite operations. You did all this cool stuff, and the reality when I went overseas is we put ourselves in some environments that were interesting. It wasn't a combat environment, so honestly, it was kind of a little bit of a letdown. I mean, just from my perspective, and I don't mean any disrespect in that. The whole life I've been reading Marcinko books, and I've been like watching James Bond movies, and then kind of when I got there, I was like, oh well, the likelihood of me like actually doing anything really cool is really low right now. So that was a little bit of a bummer.
So and
that kind of influenced, I guess, the rest of my direction.
So you decide that you're going to get out, and obviously, as you said, after having for lack of a better term, a lackluster kind of time in the SEALs where the combat stuff wasn't there, you decide to get out. In 1999, how hard was that decision for you?
Oh, it was really tough, and I think it's probably really tough for people today. I think what I've heard is that the average, and I don't know if it's right, the average tenure is right around 6 years. Like doing a couple platoons and people get out. I think that's probably the case. I don't know if that's true. If we've gotten people in for a longer period of time, given the combat environment that we're in. But yeah, it was really tough back then because to get to where you are, to be part of that community and to be a contributing factor, you're contributing, you're participating, you're part of the deal, and you're the show, and people depend upon you, right? Like when you decide that you're going to go a different route, that leaves a gap there, and it's not like you can quickly fill that gap. So there's an element of when you decide that you want to leave. As a younger guy without, where you maybe 4, 6, 8 years in, it's unavoidable, I think, that you feel like at some extent you're like, you're turning your back on your peers and walking away because it is a tight-knit community and there's a high expectation for you. And it's not something, and it also costs a lot of money for Uncle Sam to make you a SEAL. And there aren't many of them, and they can't get, the ratio of people who graduates never really changes. So, it's hard to replenish the community. And so it was a hard decision for me, and I looked at it when I joined the Navy, I felt pretty, for me, I kind of came in with two goals. I was like, I'm going to be a SEAL and I'm going to get money for college and go back to college. Cause that's something that I felt really bad about, like leaving college. And I kind of had this commitment to myself that in absence of a larger mission, like a war, then I'm going to do the school thing. And so that's kind of where I ended up when I was making the decision. It was kind of interesting because I did really well, and I had really high evals. I got a lot of great schools. Back then you had to there are certain schools you kind of had to work for, like free fall school. Now they just give it to you, like com school. All these things, and they were trying to keep me in. They offered me like a tax-free reenlistment bonus, fly me over to Bosnia to reenlist, and they offered me sniper school, and some other cool things like free fall jump master stuff I wanted to do. But I kind of weighed that with the option of doing that. And when I looked around, and I think this is a message I'd like to get out there, is that, back then in a non-wartime environment, families were struggling. It was hard for people. It's hard. If you're a SEAL, even in peacetime, you're gone all the time. It's really fun. You train all over the country. You train all over the world. You do all sorts of cool stuff everywhere. I mean, how can you not like, blowing things up and shooting guns and jumping out of airplanes and doing all that great stuff, right? But your families are kind of left behind a little bit, and it's hard. And back in the Clinton era, we brought up earlier, you had, families that they were struggling too financially. So I looked at it, and then I had people that were training me. I had some guys that were the tail end of Vietnam who saw some action. They were training, but I also had people that 15, 20 years in the Navy, done a lot of cool stuff, but never saw any action at all. So I'm looking at that saying, wow, we're in like Pax Americana. There's no action going on. I got this goal that I set for myself in absence of like a greater mission I'm going to go accomplish. And I got all these points of reinforcement, and maybe it's what I was looking for. I don't know in retrospect, but it's what I saw. Like, the best officers, the ones that I really liked, they were getting out and going and getting MBAs and killing it at Wall Street, and you just saw it happening. In fact, some of those guys are the ones who are the early supporters for Navy SEAL Foundation, which is this amazing charity we have today. The more experienced guys I was deploying with, they were all talking about their exit strategies. They're like, one of the guys that put me through ACE or advanced training, like, he got out like during advanced training. He was putting me through land warfare. And I remember vividly, like I was coming back from doing some land warfare maneuvering, and I'm cruising into the gates of the base, and this guy's like on his dirt bike leaving. He's so happy, he's popping wheelies on the way out, and that's the guy who's training me. I'm like, what message is this sending me right now? So yeah, I looked at it, and for me it was like when I looked at it, I had this goal. There wasn't any combat. People hadn't seen much action, so I wondered like, do I just want this to be Groundhog Day for me, or do I want to take what I learned in the SEAL teams and begin to like continue to improve myself in different ways and in different places as I go through life? And so it was a hard decision to make. I felt, I think it's hard for people today. If you're only in for like 4, 6, 8 years and you're thinking about it, you feel like you're deserting your teammates. If you're in for 20, 30 years and you think about getting out, you're scared. I mean, people literally are scared, and it's the unknown. You're going from all the stability that you had in the Navy, and then you're leaving that stability. So it's a hard decision. For me, the decision at the end of the day was when I thought about where I wanted to be, 5, 10 years down the road. I didn't want to be in a situation where I had a family that was struggling, and I had these other goals I wanted to accomplish. And I was a young guy, and when you're young, life, time periods seem a lot longer. And so to me, I thought that if I gave up this opportunity to go back to school now, I might not be able to do it. Right. And, that may have been a false decision. In this day and age, there's a lot of information out there. For me, there were no examples of guys who did like 10, 12 years in the teams and they became successful entrepreneurs and killed it and did all this great stuff. I couldn't see that on YouTube. I couldn't see it on the internet. That stuff just didn't exist. My world was actually very small. And so when it came down to making a decision, I listened to the people around me and I listened to my gut, and I said, as much as I want to do these cool things in the Navy, I don't know that doing those cool things over the long haul is going to get me where I want to be with what I'm doing. So that's why I made the decision.
Okay, so you go back to school, you finish up, you get your degree. How do we get to being chief sales officer at Killcliff?
Great, that's great. Yeah, so yeah, for me, it kind of I went to school, and I ended up initially when I got out in the big company, and it just wasn't there. One of the things that I didn't really fully appreciate until I got older is how much I love being a SEAL. And maybe as you get older, you remember the good and forget the bad. I've heard that before. I think it might be true. But I did love it, and there's never been a job that's really fulfilled me in so many different ways as being a SEAL did. So I kind of, and maybe some other guys self-select through this. For me, I kind of ended up like being more attracted to riskier jobs and entrepreneurial type stuff. So I got out and I went to school, and then I actually had a hard time. It was kind of interesting because when I got out, I thought like, well, I'm a SEAL, I should be CEO tomorrow. And maybe a lot of guys think that. I certainly thought it. And the reality was much different. I mean, I honestly, when I got out, like people didn't know what a SEAL was, generally speaking. Like some people did. People who are military buffs or had, family in the military or just paid attention, or saw the Charlie Sheen movie. They knew the SEAL thing was kind of special. But I remember when I got out, talking to people, is either like, hey, yeah, man, I was a SEAL. And they're like, wow, really? What's that? Or they'd be like, really? You don't look like what I envisioned a SEAL. You don't look like, Dolph Lundgren, or you don't look like, whatever they envisioned. I just, didn't fit that mold in their mind. So it was kind of interesting because initially it didn't get me anywhere. that was kind of like, that was a little bit deflating. And it's probably a good thing because it forced me kind of like, just like Bud's kind of tore me down and rebuilt me. Getting out of the Navy kind of tore me down a little bit and rebuilt me because I had to start to think differently. And it was a long path for me. It wasn't easy. I actually, when I left the job that I first got with a big company, I couldn't get a job after that. Like I couldn't even get a job. I mean, I was like applying to jobs everywhere. I couldn't get a call back. I had to do temporary work. I had to drive trucks. I mean, I had to really like it was almost like starting from scratch. I was broke all the time. It was terrible. So I started taking, like, when I finally did get my break, it was from others in the SEAL community, right? So I was at University of Chicago at the time. I had a scholarship there to study international policy and economics. And it was pretty cool. I had that opportunity for grad school, and I took it. And I was looking for opportunities. In fact, at the time, Todd Ehrlich and I had reconnected. We were both SEAL Team 8 guys, and he had this really cool thing that he had set up, but it was very speculative at the time. So I kind of passed on it, and then because I was about to get married, I was like, I need something. So there's a couple of SEALs they were part of this British private security company, and they hired me. As kind of like it was like went from being like an intern to like a full-time contractor. So I was like going to grad school and working full time, and it was really cool. It was helping them build their business around all these projects in Iraq and in other crazy countries in the world. And we ended up, this is where I got my real bug for entrepreneurial stuff. Or at least that was the first time it really resonated with me. I always had that entrepreneurial part to me. But we inadvertently found out that we had all these contracts we were winning with big construction companies. We found out they were like U.S. government contracts, and we're in this British security company. I'm like, oh man, we got to do things differently. So we incorporated and we created a subsidiary, and over a 20-month period, we grew that baby to $40 million.
Wow!
Just a small group of us. It was crazy. We had 500 people working for us across the globe. This was like pre-Fallujah. Fallujah changed everything. The incident with the security contractors. Before then, it was the security environment was not very bad in Iraq, and people drove around in soft-skinned vehicles, basically like regular cars everywhere. After that, it was crazy because everything went, it went hard-skin immediately. So there were not enough armored cars in the world to send to Iraq. Like it was the craziest job in the world. We were buying cars from Colombia, armored SUVs from Colombia, and sending them to Iraq for our people.
Holy.
It was insane experience, right? So, but what really got me is all of a sudden, like I kind of felt like it was the first time since I got out and I went through school and I'd been through the beatdown. I couldn't get a job. I was working really hard, bootstrapping it. This opportunity was the first thing that really opened my eyes again. I was like, man, I love what I'm doing. I love the element of building something and creating something. I love the element of risk that's involved in it. And maybe this is kind of what I've been searching for the whole time. I honestly didn't care what industry it was in. I loved that we built a subsidiary. We turned it into like a $40 million profit center for this company. And we were doing cool stuff all over the globe. We had like recruiting depots in Fiji and Salvador. And we stood this thing up from nothing in just a matter of months. So that's where I got my bug. I left that company though, because I had another opportunity. There was a different startup. I was in LA at the time, and I moved back to DC for this opportunity with a really cool company that was, at the time they were advising hedge funds. So they was still in this sort of international security and risk environment. And we advised hedge funds on like disruptions in Nigeria, like oil disruptions and what that means for, the markets. And we advised them on stuff like whether or not Brazil would invest in offshore oil exploration. So the idea was we were looking at political and social factors and really, volatile countries in the world and trying to make predictive analytics to hedge funds. Like, this is why you would, this is what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 months. And then the hedge funds would make their bets based upon that analysis. And this was really cool because when I got into this job, I all of a sudden had this international collection network. We had like 500 people in 65 countries. They were all like local nationals, educated, grew up in those countries. We had a team of analysts inside our company that were running those teams, and we were collecting intel, and people were buying our intel. And it was kind of right at the forefront of that private intel world, and it was at a much higher analytic rigor than some of the other stuff that kind of emerged as like, basically slightly better news. Ours was really cool, and as a result, all of a sudden I find myself from being an enlisted SEAL, having no job, couldn't get a job, people not knowing what I do. Next thing you know, I'm advising the National Intelligence Council. I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. And I'm advising the National Security Council. So we were advising the counterterrorism wing on the National Security Council. We were advising the National Intelligence Council would do these sort of like, they do these big programmatic, like, let's look at the trends in the world and look out 5 years and say, this is what's happening. Next thing you know, they're my customers. So I'm part of that process. And that was really cool. And I'm doing it with a bunch of foreign nationals. I'm doing it with people all over the world. I'm collecting intel and I'm getting it back to people, as alternative information sources as they make their decisions on, the risks and opportunities in different parts of the globe. But that was also a startup. The guy who started it, his name was Ian Brimmer. The company's called Eurasia Group. It's really cool. And he bootstrapped that with $25,000. So when I came on, I was like responsible for running one of his 3 businesses. So I got a little bug there. So that's kind of how I ended up in entrepreneurial stuff. And then I made a jump in my career. And I guess I'll kind of fast forward to get to Killcliff. But so I made a jump, and I've been in like the service economy, providing services to big corporations as a consultant and advisor. And that was cool. But what I was really interested in was like I started getting really interested in business problems in the entrepreneurial environment. And unlike, some people who are like, they create stuff from the ground and they build it. I haven't really got there yet in my career. That's definitely the next thing for me. But I kind of ended up in this area where I get into like businesses that are struggling or have a really cool product that's not got to market, and they're still kind of small and niche. And then my focus is on how do you take that, build process around it, figure out how to turn the dial, and then blow it out. That's kind of the mindset and the type of business that I'm involved in wherever I go. So I was in a software company. I made a jump to products. I went from services to products, and that was really cool. And I spent a lot of time through 2 administrations, like self-financing a turnaround of a struggling software company. And that was an awesome experience because I learned so much. I was able to kind of apply things I learned in the past to learn a lot more as I grew in leadership positions in these companies. And I started working more with private equity and venture capitalists along the way. So I got to learn how they think. And that's how I ended up at Killcliff. So with Killcliff, it was one of these things where like Todd and I have been friends for a long time. And I was actually,
and this was Todd Ehrlich you mentioned earlier, just for clarifying for the listeners. Todd Ehrlich, who you mentioned earlier, he had an offer for you earlier on that you turned down, but now you circle back with him.
Yeah, so when we first started Killcliff, we kind of flirted with the idea of me joining, but I just moved to Atlanta with the software company that I was working with. And Atlanta's my hometown. I just moved back, and his sounded really cool. They were both startups. It was just one was a little bit further along than the other, and I was like, well, these guys just moved me down. Also a Navy guy. I'm loyal to this dude. So I'm going to do this thing, right? So I took a pass on it, but circle back around, years later, I was finishing up my gig with the software company, and I was thinking about like my next steps. I actually was still engaged with the software company, but I started thinking about my next steps. I'm like, all right, I got this thing's going the right way. I've done what I came in to do. I need a new adventure. So that was in the back of my mindset. But the way this whole thing started is to bring it back to the Navy and the SEAL teams, and it was really around an event called an organization called the Honor Foundation. The Honor Foundation is really cool. It's funded by the Navy SEAL Foundation. It's a transition assistance program. It's a 4-month program. People apply to it, and it helps them sort of jumpstart their career, get it when they get out of the Navy. And you can be at any stage in your career to go there. You can be about to retire. You can be 4 years in. It's just it's just like applying to college in a way. You put in an application. Some certain group of people get admitted. They have a cohort. They have fellows. They have business leaders from all sects. They're talking to them, on a nightly basis. They have school. They have deliverables. It basically helps take somebody from high-end special operations and take that job or take that role and adopt it into a job for the future and the civilian sector. So I was getting involved with that because for me along the way, like my story, the part I really didn't touch on, I probably should touch on more, is there was always a former SEAL involved in helping me out, like to get my start. When I was trying to find a job out of grad school, like Todd actually came in and said, hey, I'm doing this private equity thing if you want to get involved. At that time, like I said, I was getting married. I didn't want to take that risk on. But it was these guys, it was this Jim and a guy named Tom who worked at Control Risks who came across me and said, you'd be a perfect fit to help us with this new business that we're starting that has all sorts of problems. And so they were former team guys. And then a little bit further down the road, because I worked full time when I was at the University of Chicago doing that, and then I went full time into that job for a while. Like, there was a guy I met while I was there named Nick Etten, phenomenal guy. He became a mentor for me, and he spent 8 years as an officer at SEAL Team 8 in the 90s, and went out and had massive success. And he and I met when I was at school in Chicago, and he was really helpful. He introduced me to people. He was a sounding board for me when I'm, doing like compensation, negotiation, all that stuff. So this guy like helped me, and he introduced me to people. In fact, before we had what we have today, which are all these groups and social media and stuff, there's this old email list, and it was run by a community manager type guy, and everybody who was on the email list was a officer from the SEAL team. Somebody who resigned their commission, they were in the private sector. I was like one of like 2 or 3 enlisted people on it. He put me on it, and it helped me network and get started.
Right.
So every step along the way, I was somehow involved with the SEALs, and the team guys were helping me out, and I wanted to get back because it was a really hard transition for me. I went from being king of the world in the SEAL teams to like couldn't get a job, and it was terrible and broke, and it was, I had to start from scratch. So for me, given the opportunities that the Honor Foundation grew, I finally reached out to them. I'm like, hey, what you guys are doing is huge, because for me, 3 days before I got out, I'm out in the field operating, doing SEAL stuff. 2 days before I get out, I'm at a course called TAPS that the Navy has. It's like a 2-day out processing course. And then I do that for 2 days, and I'm out. So I went from like operating, and I remember the week before I got out, I was doing all these crazy Draeger tests for our rebreather underwater, like really, really high-end stuff. And when I got out, like I really went from that and like hit a wall, and boom, 2 days you're out. And then I had no job, no money. I'm like, oh, what do I do now? So when I saw the Honor Foundation growing and getting investment, and the Navy SEAL Foundation partnering with it, I said, that's something I got to get behind, because people helped me along the way, and I have the opportunity to get back. So what I ended up doing was I reached out to them, and I started mentoring guys, and it was really cool because team guy, we know friends. I have friends that stayed in their entire career. We have common peers, and I'm able to talk to them and say, all right, this is everything I've learned. In the last 15 years while you've been out smoking people and having a great time doing the SEAL stuff and doing the mission. And I've been doing this stuff in the civilian sector, and I've learned a ton. So I'm going to help you fast track yourself. So I'm going to, sometimes I even give them like templates. I'm like, all right, here's a compensation plan template. Here's a user guide on how to use a CRM system. All this stuff I've learned along the way. Here's how you should structure your organization. And I've been advising companies for a little bit too, so I have that knowledge. So I bring it to them, and they're very gracious and appreciative. And it's like, I feel like I'm giving back. So I called up Todd because I was trying to get an event together for the Honor Foundation in Atlanta. It's a great entrepreneurial community. There's great businesses here. Let's do an event here for that cohort so guys can network and they can see what's here. So I was driving that, and I called Todd. I'm like, Todd, hey, look, man, let's use Killcliff. You guys are a SEAL brand. You guys have done amazing things. Why don't we use it as an anchor for a trip? And he's like, that's a great idea, but let me introduce you to the CEO. I knew Todd, Todd and I are friends, but I just didn't know he was at Peru at the time. He was on the board. He grew. He was the CEO through the first period of rapid growth through 2015. But then he went to the board. He has some other companies that he's built alongside of Killcliff. And so I met with Joe, the CEO, Joe Driscoll, and we just started talking about business problems. Like, we just had breakfast one day and started talking about business problems. The timing was really well for me. So they hired me as a consultant. They're like, hey, we want you to take a high-tech perspective on a beverage industry company and tell us, what you could improve, where are some of the gaps, give us an idea of how this company should operate moving to the future. And Killcliff has been a pioneering company, is pioneering in the recovery drink space where there really wasn't a niche for recovery drinks before Killcliff, like ready-to-drink recovery drinks. You just didn't get that. Like, that just wasn't there. And Todd and the guys, G-Dub, they started this thing. That's what they did. And they made it really, really successful. But there was also this element of, like, when I looked at Killcliff, it resembled a lot of the other beverage industry companies out there, which they're very old school. I mean, that's a very old school market. And I've been working with, high-tech venture capitalists and high-tech business leaders. They're on the forefront of everything, business process and organizational structure and, inbound leads, all this stuff, right, that software startups do. So I took that perspective to it, and I kind of diced it up. I was like, these are the things that I recommend you invest in. And I delivered that report, doing this alongside with trying to get an Honor Foundation event in Atlanta. And next thing you know, they called me up and say, "Hey, would you consider coming on and like running this component of the company for us?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? You know, I've done my job at the other place. I'm still engaged there, but I'm ready for a new challenge." And Killcliff is a amazing business. You know, when you look at these businesses, for me, they either have a market problem or an execution problem. And Killcliff really had an execution problem. Like the product's great. People love the product. There's thousands of retailers around the nation selling it. It was an execution problem. It was real easy to identify where the issues were and start investing in the right, solutions. So that's how I got involved. But what was really great about getting back involved with, it was a SEAL brand. I'd never been really in a SEAL brand before. Is now not only has my relationship become even closer with organizations like the Honor Foundation, but also the Navy SEAL Foundation. And now everything I do, to drive sales in the company results in more donations and income to the Navy SEAL Foundation. So, I said earlier on that it's really tough for families in the SEAL teams. When I was in, there's like a 90% divorce rate. People are gone all the time. It's Clinton era. So it was, financially challenging. There weren't as many, I don't think the money was quite as good and the benefits weren't as good. And some of that's still true. Families are still struggling. People still probably don't earn what they deserve for the type of job they're doing. And to be part of the foundation now that provides a backbone of support to these families and to the children and to the operators themselves, it's huge. It's awesome. It's almost like coming full circle. So for me, I happened to find Killcliff as a new career path to try to build up this company to the next level and implement all sorts of outside thinking into a beverage industry company. And the byproduct of everything I'm doing is that I get to give back even more, and I get to for all the people that helped me along the way. It's awesome being able to become more I just hired a guy out of the Honor Foundation. I was able to do that. And we're supporting events all over the country, and we just gave a bunch of money, to the foundation, and we're going out to the gala in a couple of weeks in Denver, and we just bought a huge table out there, and we have all of our investors coming in. And it's fantastic. So to be able to drive resources that we can donate to that community that they can then deploy to help out, the families that were facing some of the challenges that I perceived back then, but I think maybe at an exponential higher level now.
John, that's
really something cool.
Sorry, for those who aren't familiar with Killcliff, you talked about the recovery drink. Just kind of give everybody the concept of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So Killcliff, and you can go to the website, which we just redesigned, looks really cool. The recovery drink it's kind of the idea initially is to have something that was an alternative to what's out there, a status quo, whether it's a sugary beverage or like a soda, that had functional purpose, right? So when you look at the drink, and we call it Recover now, for years it was called Killcliff because it's the only drink we have. Now we call it Recover because we have a whole line of drinks. You're looking at a drink that's it's low caffeine. It's got B vitamins in it. It has ingredients in it that are excellent for recovery and reducing inflammation in the body. And one of the really cool things about the drink is all the ingredients are all natural and they're all FDA regulated. So unlike other functional beverages you might see out there, this is not a dietary supplement. This is a drink that you can give to kids. There's no like crazy stuff in it like creatine or BCAAs or stuff like that. This is just all natural ingredients that are all indicate they're good for reducing inflammation in the body, and they help you recover. So that's what we started the business as. And we got immediate traction within several like really high intensity communities that are looking for that type of quick recovery and that type of like to get a pep in your step after a tough workout and something that tastes really good like a treat. And CrossFit was one of them. Mixed martial arts would be another, but CrossFit even more so. So Killcliff kind of took off with the CrossFit wave because that's exactly what people wanted. They wanted a drink that was all natural, that fit their diet plans, that gave functional benefit. So that's where the company started. And the company tried a bunch of different things over time. It's all about diversifying its portfolio, but it was really over the last year or so, we really took a hard look at, we're going to be we're going to be a sports drink company, and we're going to have a full line of sports drinks for every phase in an athlete's journey, right? And we still have more to innovate, but we've done a couple of really cool things. So the Recover product is a niche that we really, we were that niche. We are that niche. But it is a niche market compared to some of the other markets for beverages. So what we did we did this in the last 9 months, and it's phenomenal that we were able as a small company to build, test, and deliver new products so quickly. And we rebranded along the way. We launched a product called Endure, which is a sports drink. Think about a healthy version of Gatorade, because that's what it is. It's a great product. It doesn't have any caffeine in it. It doesn't have any carbonation. It has a very light flavor. So it's immensely chuggable. It's great when you're before a workout or during a workout. It has a lot of potassium in it. Most Americans don't get what they need potassium-wise, and that's one of the most important elements in regulating your blood flow in your body. It's a really important thing. And also, obviously, that helps you with cramping as a result. And we all know what that is. So it's got a lot of potassium in it, and it's a great sports drink. And we're getting really great adoption right now from like the really gritty ultra endurance industry, like runners that are doing like 70 milers and bikers that are doing 500 milers. So that's really, really cool. And so we just launched an energy drink called Ignite. And Ignite is also a really different take on energy drinks. And it doesn't take much Google searching to find article after article talking about how energy drinks are terrible for you, right? You start to look at it. If you look at it, a lot of energy drinks are either loaded with crap or they're dietary supplements. And when they're dietary supplements, they're putting things in to enhance your metabolism. They're putting things in to maybe get you jacked, like creatine or BCAAs with amino acids. They're putting all this stuff in there. It's not regulated. And it's not always necessarily a good thing for you. It could oftentimes be a caustic cocktail, right? So we took a different approach to it. We took the same approach as with the Recover drink and said, you know what, like we're gonna have something that's healthy. It has none of the other stuff I just mentioned in it, but has things that are really important for you if you're drinking it as a pre-workout or if you just want sustained energy throughout the day. And so we put potassium back in it. We put 500 milligrams of potassium in it. There's no other energy drink with 500 milligrams of potassium or really any meaningful potassium at all. We also put electrolytes in it. There's no energy drinks with electrolytes in it. So if you're thinking about energy drink as a pre-workout, like if you go get the stuff that's on the market right now and you think you're doing something good for you, you're really not. You're not getting the fundamental ingredients to help you sustain energy and work out. And we put some other stuff in it that's really interesting, but it has 150 milligrams of caffeine. So that's a nice kick. That's like having like 2 Starbucks coffees or something to give you a frame of reference. But the caffeine is from green tea. That's really important because it's one of the fastest absorbing forms of caffeine in your body, and it's all natural. So again, we create an energy drink that's FDA approved, all FDA regulated ingredients, no sugar, so none of that Red Bull trash, and we put ingredients in it that really are good for your body and give you sustained energy. So by doing this, one of the things we did as a business is we introduced drinks in 2 of the largest drink categories that exist. Sports drinks like Gatorade, and you see it with like Vitamin Water and Body Armor and all that stuff that's out there. It's a massive market, and what's interesting about that market is it's trending down. The status quo is trending down. People are turning their back to sugary products and products with artificial sweeteners. And I challenge you, if you're listening to this and you think about it, you go to the shelf and look at the drink that you drink from a supermarket. It's like a Body Armor or something like that. You're going to look at the back of it and you're going to see sucralose. You're going to see a bunch of artificial stuff in it. If you go look at our Endure product, you're not going to see any of that, right? So if we just get some crumbs and scraps off the table in that market, it's massive. It's game-changing for our company. And as it's game-changing for our company, it's also game-changing for the SEAL community because we give a percentage of what we do back to the foundation. And the same thing holds true with the energy drink. And I already described in detail how it's different. But that's a massive category as well. It's really growing. And so that's an area where, if we can just get the scraps off the table, our goals are obviously much more ambitious than that. But realistically, we're a small company making our way in the world. So if we just get scraps off the table in these 2 massive categories, then that's immensely more valuable, and that's a much faster growth curve than anything we could do with Recover. Recover's great. Recover's always going to be there. Now we have a full product set of pre, intra, and post-workout, if you want to look at it in that way, all phases of the athlete's journey. And we have drinks that appeal to different types of audiences. The Recover is really appealing to high-intensity workout people. The Endure is really, appealing to team sports and like cardiovascular, like, endurance sports. And the Ignite is like, it's such a huge audience, right? Everything from like skateboarders to gamers to every time I go into a 7-Eleven or a Quick Trip, there's a line of contractors. They're always buying Monster or Red Bull. So you can even think like, contractors, ice road truckers, who names it. But it's also good for, people looking for a good pre-workout. So they all have these audiences independently, which could be larger than the audience for the full set. And that's an exciting thing for us. And we're going to continue to innovate. But for a company that in the last 6 to 9 months, we've rebranded, we've introduced new products, we've focus grouped those products with over 2,000 people to tweak in our flavors and our taste and our design and all of our messaging. That's a huge feat. It's Herculean. And we're really excited about what the future holds. And, it's one of those things that as we grow and build our business, we're able to, I want to hire more people from the Honor Foundation. I want to hire more people from the teams. We have team guys that have been part of this company. They're in the fabric of this company. Todd Ehrlich, Andy Stump, Chris Irwin. Those guys were all instrumental. I mean, Todd started it. Chris was the president of the company for about 4 or 5 years, leading it through a period of rapid growth where we were top 10 fastest growing business in Atlanta. He's now an advisor to the company and actually works for the SEAL Foundation as one of their directors. And then Andy, who was an employee for a while, but then became an athlete. So you see him. He's on commercials. He's on some of our commercials. He's got a podcast. He's a phenomenal guy. And I mean, these guys like Chris and Andy. I mean, these guys, they'll kill me for saying this, but these guys are war heroes. They did all the stuff I didn't do, and they did it with some of my best friends in the world. And being a part of Kill Cliff now, you're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, and you're trying to do a good deal for them and for the community as you move forward. And so that's really exciting place to be, and an exciting, opportunity ahead of us.
Right, real quick, John, tell everybody where they can get Kill Cliff, as far as stores is concerned, or the website or whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love if everyone just goes and checks out my website because, I had a hand in redesigning it, and I think it looks pretty cool. And I also would love it if people listen to the podcast that you and I are working on together that we'll start announcing, and it plays live on Saturdays right now. That would be great, but we're also gonna launch it on the web mid-August. So if you want to go out and get some Kill Cliff, though, there's the distribution is a lot of our distribution today is in gyms, right? It's in CrossFit studios, it's in like Gold's gyms, places like that, 24-hour fitness. We have some distribution in Whole Foods. We have Whole Foods in the Southeast, mostly in the Atlanta area, Whole Foods in Denver, so that kind of narrows down. There's not much opportunity. We're in some grocery stores across the U.S. Like we're going in some big ones, H-E-B, Hy-Vee, Giant Eagle, Wegmans. If we're not in there today, we're going in. We have those deals already set up. We're in Kroger. So there's some grocery distribution. GNC is probably our most reliable place to find it across the U.S. Only problem is you only find like a subset of the brand. You'll find the Recover products, and soon they'll be rolling out the Endure product, and they're selling the Ignite product online. So your best bet is if you can't find those places, come to our website. We're just launching a loyalty program, so we're giving our customers points for the stuff that they buy and allow them to use that for swag. Give back to our customers. And also on Amazon. So we have everything available online. And that might be, we have 2-day free shipping. So that might be the easiest place to start. If you can't find it in your local retail distribution, but, if you go to your store and you don't have it, ask your store manager for it, because we're working really, really hard to get it out there in all the grocery stores that we can today. Well,
listen, I can vouch for it. It's an incredible product. I use it. I'm a fan of it. Since you and I have crossed paths, you guys have sold me on Kill Cliff right away, and I bought in. I could tell a lot of other people that, once you try the products, you're not going to go in any other direction. So it certainly is worth it. KillCliff.com is the website. John, look, it's an incredible story, man. I mean, just to take what you learned in the SEALs and apply it into, an entrepreneurial sense and into the business world, and to be able to have the success that you had has been nothing short of fantastic. So certainly congratulations on all that, and we appreciate you being part of the Hazard Ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And, everything you're doing here, Mark, is fantastic, and I love listening to it.
All right, John Timar, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.